Welcome to the Business Resilience Decoded podcast, brought to you by Asfalis Advisors and the Disaster Recovery Journal. Crisis management in today's world is ever-changing, and this podcast is our commitment to help you navigate successful outcomes for any crisis you may face. I'm your host, Vanessa Matthews. I specialize in providing insights and solutions for crisis, continuity, and resilience across industries from real estate and healthcare to terrorism in the airline and transportation worlds. No matter what industry you're in, this podcast will provide you the tools to build resilience in your organization. Welcome back to another episode. Today's title is Business Continuity During a Recession, What You Need to Know. This is a solo episode where we'll talk a little bit about what to expect and what you may want to take into consideration when we hear the words recession or an economic slowdown. So recessions are an inevitable part of the ebb and flows of business, of the world, of our GDP. And yet they still cause a lot of panic and distress whenever we hear these things on the news and we see things happening within society that reflects that we're in a slowdown. So one of the things that I want to talk to you guys about today is, what do you do when you start to hear these things and see these things? And specifically, what should we be thinking about from a business continuity and crisis management perspective? The first concern that most people always have, especially in business, is the concern about your cash flow. And questions that come to mind for me are, is your business financially resilient? Is your household financially resilient? Will you need to conduct layoffs or cut on your spending? Are your clients and customers still able to pay their invoices on time, or are they also cutting back? And is it possible for you to cut expenses in an area unrelated to payroll to help you avoid layoffs? In my experience, I have seen that even in the business continuity and crisis management profession, we are also impacted by the great recessions and economic slowdowns within our business because people stop spending no matter what. And as a business owner, I can also tell you, in my experience, we have had to cut expenses. We've also had to cut CEO and leadership salaries in order to make sure that we can maintain our people through the slowdown. And so sometimes we have to go back to our cash statements, our profit and loss statements, and say, hey, what are all the things that are nice to have that we're paying for, but we technically don't need it? And let's get rid of some of those things that we don't actually need until this slowdown gets back up to a space where it's more profitable and more healthy for our business. And if we cut away some of those expenses, it allows us to keep the great people that we have on our team and to not get rid of our employees. So that's something for you to take into consideration. Fusion Risk Management is your North Star for operational resilience. The Fusion Framework system provides a foundation that enables you to understand how your business works, how it breaks, and how to put it back together again, which allows you to make data-driven decisions so you can anticipate, prepare, respond, and learn through business disruptions and major crisis events. Head to the link in our show notes to request a demo today. Fusion Risk Management, building a more resilient world together. The second thing is that your employees are likely feeling anxious about possible layoffs. And so it's really important that we communicate during these times. If you will not be conducting layoffs, this is a good time to communicate that to ease any anxiety or concerns that they may be experiencing. If you need to conduct layoffs, how can you do so in the most empathetic way possible? For example, and we've seen this before, a cold mass Zoom call is not it. Hashtag sis, not it. How you conduct your layoffs will impact the morale of your remaining employees and your ability to recruit talent in the future. And what's important about this as well is we're in a time where we're 2.5, 3 years out of a pandemic, kind of not really, entering into another one. The mental health of people, and specifically in the work environment, we have a lot more awareness about what that looks like and what folks' concerns are. And that's something we need to take into consideration and take seriously. And so it is really important, and also from a public safety perspective, that we're very mindful of how you, as businesses, put your hiring managers, your HR team members, and employees in predicaments when conducting a layoff and what that means. I'll never forget at a previous company, a Fortune 200 business, they conducted layoffs. And the week before those layoffs, they did a sweep through the parking lot. And they found about 5 or 6 weapons, to include guns, in the parking lot, because employees were expecting to hear that there were going to be layoffs. So the security team took some extra steps to see what would the environment look like if we did it today, and who had things in their vehicles that could potentially cause harm to the workforce. Those are things that you might want to take into consideration. But again, the point I want to make here is the importance to being empathetic and to remember that people matter and people are first. How we treat people, how we talk to people is a part of managing risk, and it's also a part of how you manage and get through a recession. The third point that I want to make for you is recessions are temporary. There's a beginning point and an ending point every time. It's never when we want it to be. It is temporary. How you operate through them can have an impact that outlasts the recession. So what are your company's core values? How are you living out those core values in a recession? Yes, business is still business, but business heavily relies on relationships with people. So the impression you leave on them should be top of mind. And we often talk about this. There's this concept of, your core values and communications, and where do we fit in from a business continuity and crisis management perspective. And to that point, no matter what the incident is, whether it's a DE&I incident, whether it's an active shooter, or whether it is a recession, your communication, who you say you are, how you show up in times of crisis, it still matters. And it's important that it's consistent the whole way out. What you say internally to your employees versus what you say externally to the public, it matters, right? And so these are just 3 quick tips that might be helpful for you and your leadership. Take this back to your communications team, to your HR team, to your leadership team, and have them discuss and talk through what conversations, what communications you plan on having with your employees as you prepare and embrace for a recession. We'll see you on the next podcast. Thank you for listening to the Business Resilience Decoded podcast, brought to you by Asfalis Advisors and Disaster Recovery Journal. Make sure you check out the show notes for this episode to see all the upcoming events, programs, and ways we can support you. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, leave us a review, and share it with a friend. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.